Howdy folks, hope you're all having a great, I hope you all had a great weekend. Forget it, because it's Monday, and I'm sorry. I know it sucks, but what are you going to do? And welcome to another episode of Mingles with Jingles, sponsored once again by NordPass, the password manager. As usual, sign up for a 2-year NordPass premium plan, plus an extra 4 months for free, all covered by NordPass's 30-day, no questions asked, money-back guarantee. Just go to nordpass.com/jingles and use code JINGLES to get this deal. Honestly, don't be the complete idiot that I was for far too many years, using the same email address and the same 2 passwords for every single website that I had a login for. Because while I'm sure sites like Amazon.com have pretty good security, if I'm using the same password and email address on Amazon as I'm using on, for example, grumpyoldgnome.com, where they don't have such good security and they get breached, then the hackers just go on a fishing expedition, send their bots out to see where else they can get into with that same combination of email address and password, and then you log into Amazon one morning and find out that you've just spent $3,000 on Amazon gift cards. So don't be that guy, take better care of your online security. And I don't really care how you do it, but you should do it. And if you're lazy like me, you pay NordPass to do it for you, because honestly, it's not expensive. And they do a way better job than I could. So, nordpass.com/jingles and use code JINGLES to get a 2-year NordPass premium plan with 4 months for free, all covered by their 30-day, no questions asked, money-back guarantee. So, it's funny how quickly time goes by. Because I was thinking to myself, in the wake of the current latest Blizzard Activision shitstorm surrounding Overwatch 2 and Modern Warfare 2, which we'll come on to in a moment, are Blizzard Activision the new Bethesda? Because there was a time when a week couldn't go by without Bethesda kicking up a PR shitstorm of epic proportions with absolutely everything that they did. But then it occurred to me, it's been a really long time since we've had any public relations disasters from Bethesda. Because there absolutely was a time, and we're talking around the release of Fallout 76 here, when you could not look at the week's PC gaming news without seeing something, and normally more than one story, about how Bethesda have managed to screw something up with Fallout 76. Now, we're not just talking here about anything as mundane as the game just not being very good. We're talking about a game that just didn't work, that was broken and bugged in so many different ways. We're talking bugs that existed in the game engine as far back as Fallout 3, that still existed in Fallout 76, but were elbowed aside by a plethora of new game-breaking bugs. The absolute fiasco that they endured with the way they marketed the merchandising of the game, with people paying hundreds and hundreds of dollars for Ultimate Edition sets, and then basically not getting what it was that they paid for with the merchandise included in the whatever edition it was of the game that they'd paid hundreds of dollars for. Case in point being what was advertised as a pretty nice looking canvas bag with all of the bundled merchandise. But when it eventually arrived, late, it was some cheap, tatty, nylon piece of shit, which was clearly not what had been advertised. And when players expressed their outrage at being ripped off in this way, Bethesda reluctantly, extremely reluctantly, agreed to compensate players who bought that edition of the game and not received the canvas bag that they'd paid for, agreed to compensate them by giving them a whole $5 to spend with the in-game Atom store on virtual items. And ironically, the amount of atoms that they were given to spend in the store wasn't even enough to purchase an in-game canvas bag to compensate them for the real one that they'd paid hundreds of dollars for and hadn't got. And when the backlash from this one kicked off, I love these history lessons. The backlash from that one kicked off, Bethesda agreed that people would be able to get a refund, and so they put up a website where everybody could input their details, where their refunds would be processed. But the website was completely insecure, and you could basically click on and find the personal information, including addresses and telephone numbers of everybody who registered on the website. I mean, literally, there was a time when everything that Bethesda touched turned to shit. But it occurred to me, as I was looking at the latest Blizzard Activision fiasco, which we will come on to in a moment, it's been a really long time since I've heard about Bethesda in the PC gaming news, or the news in general, other than that Microsoft have bought them out. And then it occurred to me, you know, Fallout 76 was in 2018. I mean, it's been a really long time. And I realised that there's nothing, you know, terribly wrong with Fallout 76 anymore. I think around about a year after initial release, it had finally been patched to the state where it was no longer the worst game in the world, and is now at least vaguely playable and enjoyable. I mean, I'm guessing it must be, because I haven't heard anything bad about Bethesda or Fallout 76 in around about 2 years. Maybe that's the secret. Maybe that's the secret to how Bethesda managed to shed the title of worst game developer in the world. It's not that other developers rose to the occasion and took the title from them, although CD Projekt Red did have a damn good try with the botched console release of Cyberpunk 2077. And Blizzard Activision and Ubisoft do seem to be in competition with each other to see who can be the worst, but they never really managed to sink to the depths that Bethesda did at around the release of Fallout 76 and then the year that followed, with epic mishandling of everything associated with the game and its development and its support and its merchandising and its security and its community. I mean, everything that Bethesda touched turned to shit. And I think I might understand why we haven't had a negative Bethesda story in, at least 2 years now. It's because they haven't done anything. Fallout 76 was the last thing they did, and that came out 4 years ago. I mean, yeah, I know they've got Starfield in development, but that's at least a year away. They haven't actually released anything since 2018's Fallout 76. Maybe that's the secret. I mean, if you're not actively abusing your employees in the way that Ubisoft and Blizzard Activision do, if you just do nothing, if you just sit on your hands, because every time you touch something it bursts into flames, if you just don't touch anything for a couple of years, there can't be any bad press. Because you haven't done anything. You haven't done anything for there to be bad press about. Maybe that's Bethesda's secret, because it seems to be working. I mean, it's fair enough, nobody's talking about Bethesda anymore, which could be seen to be a bad thing, but at least because there was a time. Maybe that's Bethesda's secret. Just duck, hide, keep your head down, hope everybody forgets you exist and stops talking about you, and hope that somebody else does something even worse. Because there was a time, and it wasn't that long ago, when you couldn't say the word Bethesda without also having to say the words "has screwed up again" in the same sentence. And if nobody's talking about you, nobody is saying Bethesda has screwed up again. And it does seem to have been a successful strategy for Bethesda, assuming that's what their strategy is. And then it occurred to me, hang on a minute, Bethesda, Blizzard Activision, Ubisoft. Why has nobody mentioned Electronic Arts? I mean, they are the original great evil, aren't they? Their CEO, Bobby Kotick, he is the Antichrist. And yet, I mean, I'm not saying Electronic Arts haven't done anything in the last couple of years. Let's not forget, this is the company that tried to they didn't try to, they did, and they still do, push loot box gambling on children. And then when they got taken to court and told to stop by certain governments, and lost, countersued those governments to defend their right to peddle gambling on children. And yet we haven't heard anything despicable about Electronic Arts in a couple of years either, other than the news that they might be getting bought out as well. All of which, I suppose, is a very long-winded and roundabout way of saying that with Electronic Arts basically not doing anything especially evil and despicable in the last year or two that I'm aware of, and with Bethesda appearing to just adopt the, look, if we don't do anything, we can't do anything wrong strategy, And with the stories of a horrific culture of systematic and institutional employee abuse at Blizzard, Activision and Ubisoft kind of fading into the background now. Although it shouldn't, because that's exactly what they want. I mean, let's not forget, and focusing on Blizzard Activision here, although Ubisoft were just as bad, when the stories and allegations and outright revolt from their employees first broke, Blizzard Activision's initial response was to deny any wrongdoing, and of course Ubisoft did exactly the same thing until eventually admitting that, yeah, maybe we should be actually doing better. But the initial response was, of course, to deny any wrongdoing, and then this was followed up by immediately firing the most egregious of the wrongdoers, their president resigning, and then conducting an internal investigation into whether or not they actually had done anything wrong, which, surprise, surprise, concluded that no, we didn't do anything wrong, we were fine. Everything's fine here, and no, we're not rehiring the people that we fired for doing things wrong, even though we have just investigated ourselves and determined that neither they nor anybody remaining at the company did in fact do anything wrong, because they're the worst kind of abusive, toxic arseholes and we don't want anything to do with them, even though we have just proven that they didn't do anything wrong. And neither did we, because we just concluded an investigation that proves it. It was a bit like having the Nazis investigating and judging themselves at the Nuremberg war tribunals. But that was a long time ago now as well. I mean, the situation is still ongoing in a legal sense, but in a news sense, it's yesterday's news. Which is kind of sad, because it really shouldn't be. Which is kind of sad, really, because it shouldn't be. All of which means I'm really struggling lately to come up with news of anything especially despicable from any of the big games publishers. Which means I'm left with scraps like the... well, I can't even really call it a disaster, because in comparison... You know, even in comparison with some of the stories of yesteryear, this isn't really that bad. It's just kind of... really... And I'm talking about the phone thing with Overwatch 2. So this should have been a really, really big week for Blizzard Activision with the release of Overwatch 2, which by all accounts is a pretty good game. I mean, there's nothing wrong with the game, but you need a phone number to play it. Yeah, that's right. You need to provide a phone number to your Battle.net account in order to even play Overwatch 2. And it will be the same with the upcoming Modern Warfare 2. Why? I mean, this is like I talked about a few months ago, me going into a store and wanting to buy a shirt and them not being able to sell me a shirt unless I could provide my email address. I mean, what? I'm pretty sure people were successfully managing to buy and wear shirts long before email addresses existed. Why is it suddenly a prerequisite now? And of course it was because they wanted to target me with direct marketing. I mean, I knew that, but they wouldn't come out and admit it. So I just ended up not buying the shirt. But why do I need a phone number in order to play a computer game? Well, it turns out that the reason is because Overwatch 2 is free to play. See, the original Overwatch had a price tag, and that was the barrier to entry. But anybody can play Overwatch 2. If you played Overwatch 1 and you were a dick or a hacker or a cheater, you would lose the account, and that meant that you'd lost the investment that you'd made in paying for the game in the first place. So that was the deterrence, if you like. But with Overwatch 2 being free to play, if you get your account banned for any reason, there's nothing to stop you from just creating another account. It's a free to play game. Just do it. It doesn't cost you anything. So Blizzard Activision felt like they had to have some way of threatening players with something that they would lose if they did anything that warranted having their account banned, and that became their phone number. So if you're playing Overwatch 2, and again, this applies to the upcoming Modern Warfare 2, you must supply a phone number with your account. So if that account gets banned, in order to generate a new account, you need a new phone. And that's the deterrent. Yep, all seems pretty logical. I mean, you can understand the reasoning behind that. It's not, again, compared with some of the stories that I've gone over so far in this video, this is nothing, right? Absolutely nothing. It's not, intrinsically evil or anything. You can understand the reasoning. Except the phone number that you provide cannot be on a prepaid phone or a voice over IP service. And that can be a problem. From the PC Gamer article on this subject, they were contacted by Somebody had installed the Modern Warfare 2 beta test in September. A player from Florida. And after installing it, they were asked for a post-paid phone number in order to start playing. Battle.net refused to accept their prepaid phone number. They're with a service called Cricket Wireless in Florida, apparently, which has also failed with Overwatch 2, so they're completely unable to play. He said, "This seems very wrong to require video game players to enter into a contract with a telecom company before being allowed to play the game they paid for, especially when prepaid phone plans like mine are becoming more and more common. This isn't the gas station special of yesteryear anymore. I have an iPhone and a phone plan that works no different in practice than any other contract plan. Unlimited talk, text, data, etc. But because I make a monthly payment, I'm ineligible to play future Activision titles?" Yep, I'm afraid so. Blizzard Activision were of course contacted by various different news outlets to comment on this issue, and they're aware that it's an issue. I mean, of course they are. You can say a lot of things about Blizzard Activision, but they're not really stupid, and they don't care. This is apparently the price that they are prepared to pay to ensure that they are able to police what people these days refer to as bad actors in the gaming community. So if you have a prepaid phone, you will not be able to play Overwatch 2, Modern Warfare 2, or pretty much any upcoming Activision Blizzard titles. And those are just the Activision Blizzard titles. Where one game's developer leads, others are sure to follow. So yeah, it's a bit like the old situation with, well, most of you are probably completely unaware of this, unless you live in Germany or Austria and you have a PlayStation. This one's probably slipped completely under your radar as well. First, a bit of background. When I was a lad, if you wanted to watch a movie, well, stop laughing, alright, it wasn't that long ago. Actually, when I was a lad, if you wanted to watch a movie, you had to either go to the cinema or wait at least a year for it to come out on terrestrial TV. And then, of course, in the 80s, there was the home video revolution, with VHS famously winning out over Sony Betamax. And then, of course, time and technology moved on, and VHS tapes were replaced by DVDs, and then Blu-rays, and, oh, I suppose there are still places where, I mean, I don't think there's anywhere in the, certainly not in my country, where you can still buy a VHS copy of a movie or a TV show. And I don't know of anybody who still sells VHS players, but I believe you can still get them in the USA. But anyway, I digress. Time and technology moves on. And now, of course, nobody buys physical media anymore. It's all online. It's all digital copies that you download or just stream. You basically buy the right to watch it from whichever service you bought it from, like Netflix or Amazon Prime or Disney Plus or the PlayStation Store or whatever. Oh, hang on a second, back up. Was that the PlayStation Store? Yes, that was the PlayStation Store. And what exactly is so special about the PlayStation Store, and what does this have to do with people in Germany and Austria? Oh, I'm so glad you asked. Hang on a second, I will get there. Because back in the days when you actually went and bought physical media from a brick and mortar store or ordered it from Amazon, you had physical media. Right, if I walked into Virgin Music and bought a DVD copy of John Wick, I didn't care if Virgin went bankrupt the next day. I had my physical copy of John Wick. I didn't have to return it because the place that sold it to me went out of business, or because they lost the licensing deal with the studio that made the movie. But that is precisely what has happened to anybody from Germany or Austria who bought a copy of the John Wick movie on the PlayStation Store in order to stream on their TV from their PlayStation, because Sony, for one reason or another, hasn't renewed the licensing deal with the studio in Germany and Austria specifically. So if you have bought and paid for, and John Wick is just one example of the many movies that this affects, but if you have bought and paid for the John Wick movie from the PlayStation Store, and you are German or Austrian, you may have noticed that it has disappeared from your library. The movie has gone. You no longer have the right to watch something that you paid money for. There's a lot to be said for doing things the old-fashioned way. And on that Teutonic bombshell, that is it for this week's episode of Mingles with Jingles. I hope you've enjoyed it. I hope it's kept you occupied and your mind off things for at least the last almost 20 minutes. And I hope you're all going to have a great week. As always, take care, stay safe, and I'll catch you next time.